Thank you very much for joining us today on this webinar. This first started out as a really basically a training program for our employees to learn more about the Walla Walla AVA and the sub AVA, the Rocks District that is wholly within the Walla Walla AVA. And then I thought, well, since we're providing this training for our employees, I thought, well, maybe we should invite our owners and our club members to see if they would like to listen in and join in. And I can see by those the numbers that are racking up on participants that are on my screen. We're still collecting people joining this webinar. So thank you very much. Well, given how quickly it's ratcheting up, I think I might give it just a few more minutes to see who we can collect. I noticed that someone has already identified the Q&A. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can ask questions in that Q&A button. And we do have a couple of our staff members that are standing by to answer those questions. A number of you know Mandy. She's the head of our marketing, and she's there to answer those questions along with Dana, who is our administrative manager. She's also there to answer questions. And Christine Clare is on this call with me, and she answers some of those questions. And then you'll be able to view the questions and the answers, I am told, when they provide them. And then what they'll do is they'll leave some questions up for me to go and check that Q&A after the presentation to see if there's questions that they wanted me in particular to speak to in the latter part of this webinar. The numbers are still ratcheting up, but I know it's a little bit after 4, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with this presentation. Now, in here you can see on your screen, of course, the estate vineyard at Willamette Valley Vineyards. And really, actually, it's a great screen and a great image to start with, because it's really very germane to the subject of the Walla Walla AVA and the Rocks District. You know that and I know that a number of you have also, for this presentation, gotten several wines to perhaps even enjoy during this presentation. There's a 2016 Pamburn Cabernet Sauvignon, a 2017 Maison Bleu Voyager Syrah. Voyager, by the way, is the term for the French-Canadian trappers who hauled the furs and the goods between the trading posts of the Hudson's Bay Company. And then there's a 2018 Métis. Those are the three wines that three wine brands we'll be discussing in this webinar. And I'm hoping some of you are able to enjoy them as we go through this. But this is really storytelling about what's happened in the Walla Walla, what's happened in the Rocks District of Milton Free Water, and how it all relates to Willamette Valley Vineyards. So be prepared for some stories. But again, the first thing I wanted to mention is that these basalt hillsides that grow world-class Pinot Noir in the Willamette Valley, they originated through what are called Columbia River flood basalts. And those flood basalts originated from the edges of the terrains of the Blue Mountains. And there's really an amazing soil story that goes behind this. But many millions of years ago, as the tectonic plates were moving and the subduction zone outside in the Pacific Ocean was pushing the Farallon plate underneath Oregon, lifting Oregon up out of the ocean. Some of that basalt as lava bubbled up in these creases at the base of the Blue Mountains. And then this lava flowed and oozed out of these very large creases in the ground, and they followed the Columbia River drainage back to the ocean, back west to the ocean. And so these hillsides that we grow our Pinot Noir on originated at the base of the Blue Mountains in the Walla Walla AVA. And in fact, the soil that is now the state soil that is famous for is called Jory. And that is named after a pioneer family who came to Oregon on the Oregon Trail, rafted down the Columbia River with their wagon, and then pulled their wagons from the Columbia River all the way down to the Salem Hills, where they settled. And in fact, when you look across the freeway, you look across the valley from the winery, from the windows and the deck of the winery, you can see our new vineyard that'll be going in on the original Jory claim land. And you'll be able to see that in the distance. But that's part of this remarkable soil story of Oregon, is where did this lava come from? This basalt that formed these amazing hillsides in the Willamette Valley. And the fact is, they came from Eastern Oregon in the creases of the base of the Blue Mountains. And they flowed west following the ancient path of the Columbia River. So when you come to the winery and you stand on that deck, way beneath your feet lies the original ancient riverbed of the Columbia River. And as these flows, form the Salem Hills and then later the Eola Hills and then the Dundee Hills, they push the Columbia River further north. There's another interesting aspect of the Oregon story. That is a winemaker who wanted to come and make Pinot Noir in the Willamette Valley. Ended up, instead, by happenstance, making wine as a traveling winemaker in Walla Walla. And he thought, of course, Walla Walla was just adjacent to the Willamette Valley, not realizing how distant it was. But when he was there, desiring to really make Pinot Noir in the Willamette Valley, he discovered these stones that lie in this concentrated, unique area at the base of the alluvial fan of the Walla Walla River. And I'm going to show you that a little bit later. But his name was Christophe Baron. And so it's an interesting connection between those that desire to make world-class Pinot Noir and how did the Walla Walla AVA and the Rocks District get formed. Here in this slide, you can see Oregon. Oregon is the 10th largest state in the nation. Now France is 2.5 times its size in geographic area, but Oregon has many of the very same kinds of microclimates, unique soil conditions, as does France. And here you can see our holdings, our vineyard holdings. We now own and lease, farm over 1,000 acres in the Willamette Valley, and you can see the vineyard names on the left-hand side of your screen. And on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the vineyards that we own in the Walla Walla AVA, the Pameron Vineyard and the Maison Bleu Vineyard in the Rocks District. And then, of course, the Blue Mountains, which is just to its east, actually is 1/6 of the acreage of Oregon is the Blue Mountains. It's a very large ancient formation. The unique thing about the Walla Walla Valley is it's actually warmer during the day, for example, in July than Napa, but it's much cooler at night. And that cool air flows down off the Blue Mountains and settles and pools into the Walla Walla Valley at night. And what that does is that elongates the period of maturation for the fruit and retains the acidity in the fruit, making it really kind of very unique in that regard. Now, the Rocks District, as you can see, is wholly within the southern tip of the Walla Walla AVA, which crosses over from Washington into Oregon. And because it is wholly within the Walla Walla AVA, but within the entire state of Oregon, in other words, it doesn't cross, the Rocks District does not in Washington, under federal law, those who make wine from grapes grown in the Rock District, but make the wine in the state of Washington, cannot use the federal designation, the Rocks District. And so it's been said that it was America's one of America's greatest AVAs that you couldn't read on a label. And that's because of the unique aspect of the federal law that you cannot use an AVA distinction or designation if the wine is made in another state. And of course, that is one of the motivations for building a winery in the Rocks District. The Rocks District is also the second smallest AVA in the state of Oregon. The smallest is Ribbon Ridge. We actually have property in the Ribbon Ridge. We're going to be planting the Pinot Noir, but the Rocks District is just a little bit larger than the Ribbon Ridge. There's about 348 acres planted there. There's another 200 acres in development. My guess is Ribbon Ridge will always be small because there's only about 1,000 acres in the Ribbon Ridge suitable for planting. And there's more than that suitable acreage that could develop in the Rocks District. Now here you can see just an image of one of our Maison Bleu bottlings, and then the accolades that these wines and the growers and the winemakers have earned with these wines. As you can see, these wines have performed remarkably well in reviews. The Métis is our representation of a blend of the Rocks District as well as the Walla Walla AVA. And they have very unique aromatic and flavor profiles. And so that blend is a unique combination that we'll be offering the public. And then the Maison Bleu is a Rocks District designated brand. And then Pamburn is a Walla Walla AVA designated brand that is located in what's called the Savine vineyard development. Now, this is just a slide to remind people that we do have a tasting room in Walla Walla in Washington, in the city of Walla Walla, just a kitty corner to the Marcus Whitman Hotel. So when you head out to downtown from the Marcus Whitman Hotel, you'll just diagonally cross right across the intersection, you will see the Pameron Maison Bleu tasting room. Now, some of you might remember this because you helped plant these vines with a crowbar. When we dedicated this vineyard, we actually went and planted the Syrah with a crowbar. And if you look closely, you can, in that inset image, you can see all the rocks that are at the base of this, in the soil. The wines that come from the Rocks District of Milton-Free Water are, instead of being what you describe as fruit driven, they're terroir driven. They're very much a representation of the soil. In fact, this AVA, the Rocks District Milton-Free Water, is the only AVA in America that is defined solely by its soil type. This soil is formed from the Walla Walla River's alluvial fan, and I'm going to show you an image of that in just a little bit. Now, Maison Bleu is a brand that was developed by John Murray, formerly a French Canadian as well. And he started that back in 2007, earned quite a reputation. We, of course, are the lucky owners of that wine brand, but we wanted to make sure it had a home in the Rocks District since he was simply obtaining fruit from those vineyards. So we owned 37 acres in the Rocks District, and 15 acres of it is planted to Syrah, Grenache, and Viognier. And this part of the Rocks District is at about 950 feet in elevation. So it's got a little bit of an advantage because it's a higher point in the Rocks District. And of course, frost is a concern there. Chris Bannock is the vineyard manager for this vineyard. Now here you can see a quote from Harvey Steinman from the Wine Spectator magazine, editor-at-large. Look at what he says: the most distinctive AVA in the United States, making some of the greatest wines in America. Just think of that. And then you can see there in this image, all those rounded basalt stones that were really washed down out of the Blue Mountains with the flowing, actually the raging water of the Walla Walla River that formed this alluvial fan. When you think about the flavor profiles in the wines from this AVA, they're described as salty, meaty, of umami flavors. You know, what the Japanese describe as the essence of deliciousness. One of the 5 core flavors. Now, there's the Blue Mountains in the background. And this is going to really surprise you, I think. The Blue Mountains have been put together through tectonic plate movements over many, many millions of years. In fact, well over 155 million years. There's a portion of the Blue Mountains that they've identified through fossil analysis, marine fossil analysis, that originated in the Mediterranean. And so the Blue Mountains are among the oldest rock geologic formations in the Northwest. And if you think about the tectonic plates and they move, the tectonic plates move at about the speed of your fingernails growing. So they'll move at about 1.5 inches a year is the movement of these tectonic plates. And so over a period of about 150 million years, it took them that long to move from the Mediterranean all the way over to the northern part of Oregon. And because this rock is so old, of course, it contains minerals, of course, and precious metals like gold and chromite, chromite is used to harden steel. And then you can see in this image, the drainage of the Walla Walla River as it comes into Milton Freewater. And if you look closely at this red outline, that's the red outline of the Rocks District. And that is drawn to identify that alluvial fan that was formed as these raging waters came off of the Blue Mountains, moving these basalt rocks, which it polished into stones as it pushed them down into the valley. And the reason why it created this alluvial fan in the way it did is that it pushed the rocks down into an area to where it kind of blocked the flow of the river. And so the river actually started on your right. It started on the southern part of this valley, this part of the valley, and then meandered over to its present location, which is on the left, further up, just at the edge of that top part of that red circle that you see drawn on this map. By the way, the Milton Freewater is one of the hyphenated towns in America, and the Freewater name actually comes from the name that is given to it because free water was offered to settlers for residential use to encourage them to settle in the town of Freewater. You know, the other thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is just how you look at the soil, you look at these rocks, and you think, well, how on earth did this all happen? Well, when this all started, remember the moon was actually closer to the planet than it is today. And when the moon was closer, it has much stronger effect on the weather and on tidal conditions. And so the weather was much more severe millions of years ago, producing literally these raging rivers and a lot of hydraulic action, much more than we see in our today. And by the way, the moon is moving away from us at about the same speed as the tectonic plates move at about 1.5 inches a year, about the same speed as your fingernails grow. You know, the other thing that's really fascinating about the Blue Mountains is that the world's largest living organism lives in the Blue Mountains. It's called Amarilla ostiae, and it's really like a mushroom mat. That's about 2,400 acres in size, and they estimate weighs over 35,000 tons. The single largest organism on the planet. Now here's an image looking down at this alluvial fan. You can see the Walla Walla River as it leaves the Blue Mountains and flows into the Walla Walla Valley. And you can see how there's the elevation, the highest point, at just over 1,000 feet in elevation. And then you can go to the lowest point of the AVA, the Rocks District AVA, and there's about, what, 800 feet in elevation. And then you can see the present course of the Walla Walla River has been pushed to the north and away from the south, but originally it flowed to the south. And then as it got moved over, it just created this big alluvial fan of all these rounded cobblestones, a very unique geologic structure. Now, if you want to know where our vineyard is, you can see it relative to this. So you can see Highway 11. Highway 11 is running north to south. It's coming north from Walla Walla, going south to Milton Freewater. And then you can see a red line going to the west. That's called Sunnyside Road. And Sunnyside Road is the entrance into the Rocks AVA, the Rocks District AVA. And right at the corner of Highway 11 and Sunnyside Road is our property, right at that corner. So just at the base of that corner, there's a convenience store with a really good selection of craft beer. And the rest of the property there, some 37 acres, is ours. Now, if you look a little bit to the lower left part of that drawing of the Rocks District AVA, that just above that is where the Savine district is located. So in order to get to the Pamburn Vineyard, you've got to drive right by our Maison Blue Vineyard. Now here's an image of a project we're working on. Not only are we planted vines there, but we're also planning to build a winery, restaurant, hospitality offering there. And so this is just an example of a drawing that's being done. We're working with the city of Milton Freewater on this project. It's pretty exciting. Right now, the staff is working on extending city water out to this site so that we can support the hospitality offerings we want to offer and give wine enthusiasts an extraordinary experience of being able to enjoy these wines, see these wines made in the Rocks District. And this is just a kind of a close-up, as you can see, of the Maison Blue label. And I thought what I'd do is just point out a couple of features of the label. It has, as its feature, it has this, it's pronounced Oxito cross. And the Oxito cross actually is pre-French. It represents the people, the Ossicotans, that lived in the southern part of France. And this was their symbol. That was their national symbol. They actually even had their own language, and later only joined to become part of France much later, 700 years later. But that's where that symbol originates from. Now, just before I move on to this next site, I wanted to just talk a little bit about some of those characteristics that come from that singular AVA of the Rocks District. What you get from the Maison Blue bottlings and actually other wines grown and made from the Rocks fruit is you get this real sense of purity and almost like a dazzling expression of fresh berries, plum, orange zest, violets, black pepper, pipe tobacco, fresh tilled earth. Those are just some of the characteristics you'll find from the wines, and it's particularly in this one that you have in front of you. Now here is Savine. Now this is just above the Rocks District. So the Rocks District is just, where that V is. You see that Savine V, that kind of stylized V. You can see the plantings, the orchards there. Well, that's where the Rocks District comes really close to this part of the hill. Now this is a hill that faces north. It slopes north, and it's of high elevation. So one of the highest elevations, just right at the top, at the bottom part of your screen. And if you look closely, you can identify where our vineyards are that we own. So if you look in the kind of the center of this image, you can see Willamette Valley Vineyards and you can see Pamburn. So that's the Pameron Vineyard. And it slopes, as you can see, to the north. And then if you go over to the left, you can see, for example, Doubleback. That's owned by Drew Bledsoe, a former, a New England Patriots quarterback. Drew Bledsoe, he owns the vineyard winery Doubleback. This is his vineyard McQueen. And we have the property, which we haven't planted yet, which is over here called Willamette Valley Vineyards Pamburn, that's just to the base of his vineyard. And the reason why we got these two parcels is because the parcel that's in the center of your screen has this loess. This basically it's like rock flour. It was made by glaciers that were advancing and retracting, but advancing from Canada into the United States. It ground up the mountains and the rocks and made rock flour, this very fine dust. And it got blown up and blown around, and then it washed down off the mountains during all this glacial action that took millions of years to transpire, and it formed this very large Columbia Valley lake bed, and then eventually it dried up, and it got blown up onto the hillsides, and so that's where this loess comes from, and that's what that vineyard soil type is very much dominant there. But the soil over in this other site, and the reason why we got this other site is because there's only a dusting of this loess on the top of this soil. The rest of it is fractured basalt. And I can't wait for you to see it. And it'll be fascinating to see how the vines make their way down through that fractured basalt. But we're going to get a different effect because of the growing conditions, the soil conditions there. Now here you can see the founders, some of the founders of the Walla Walla wine industry. And so I'll start on the left with, that's Marty Clubb. And Marty Clubb is, he and his wife, Megan, they own LaCole. Now it was Megan's parents who started LaCole. That was Joan and Baker Ferguson. They started LaCole back in 1983, which is the same year we started Willamette Valley Vineyards. And they have the distinction of making one of the best wines in the world. And they grew it from the Ferguson Vineyard, which is located up in this Savine development. It was rated in the 2014 World Wine Awards. That was the 2011 as the best Bordeaux varietal wine above 15 pounds in cost in the world. The person next to Marty, coming now to my right, to your right, is Norm Mckibben. And he planted his vineyard in 1989. And he's got a nickname called Stormin' Norman. He's regarded as actually one of the fathers of the Walla Walla wine industry. He owns Pepperbridge, started Pepperbridge in Amavi in 1998. And then, of course, a number of you know Christine. I'm going to talk about Christine a little bit here. But next to Christine is Chris Figgins. Now, his parents, Gary and Nancy Figgins, they started Leonetti Cellars. And Gary named Leonetti Cellars after his grandparents, where Gary saw wine that they were making in their cellar when they moved, actually in the beginning of the 1900s, as immigrants from Italy to the Walla Walla area. And he planted and started the first vineyard in Walla Walla in 1977. I think it's 1978 was his first wine, Cabernet Sauvignon. And then Chris Figgins, their son, owns he owns the Figgins family brand, his own winery. He makes a wine actually grown in the Willamette Valley, and he actually gets some of that fruit, I believe, from us. And it's called a brand called Toil, a Pinot Noir brand. So that's something you might want to try. And here behind us in this image is the Seven Hills Vineyard, which these gentlemen own together, as well as they were the developers behind Savine. And they're the ones who encourage us encouraged us to come and plant a Cabernet Sauvignon and other Bordeaux varietals on this hillside right along with their vineyards. And I'm going to tell a little story about Christine in a minute. So I'm just going to get to this next slide so I can. So here's an image of a picture we took when Christine encouraged Jan and I to come over and meet with Norm Mckibben. And this was back, and you'll have to remind me, I don't know, Christine, if you can, remind me, it was 2012, 2013, 2004, I'm not sure exactly which year it was. We went over to see Norm and to talk to him about Savine. And, but I wanted to show you this image because Norm wanted this picture taken here because his feet is the irrigation canal that was dug by the trappers of the Hudson's Bay Company to move water down to their gardens. And it goes right through the Seven Hills Vineyard and is still there today. So the story I wanted to tell you was when we went over to visit with Norm and we saw the opportunity that was happening there. This is, of course, 7, 8, 9 years ago. And Jan was driving the car, and it's a long drive, back to the Willamette Valley from Walla Walla. Jan was driving, Christine was up in the front seat, and I was sitting in the back. And we were thinking about, now, how on earth do we figure out a way to really go into this area properly and do a great job? And we thought, well, why don't we go back and use the method of gathering up wine enthusiasts like we did when we started Willamette Valley Vineyards? And so we thought, let's do a preferred stock offering where we could raise the capital as well as the wine enthusiasts together to embark on this effort of creating special vineyard sites, Oregon Estate Vineyards. And so Christine co-founded with me this idea of Oregon Estate Vineyards. And we started just above Elton Vineyard with Pinot Noir plantings at the Ingram Estate, creating the Elton brand. And then came over here to do this one. And it was in that long car ride back from Walla Walla where this idea was developed. And it was the idea we believed that if we attracted wine enthusiasts and shared this dream with them, that they would get behind it, and they did. And the other thing we believed that the cost of the dividend, in other words, the investment return to the shareholder, would be more than covered by the wine enthusiasts' own purchases of wine, even with their discounts. And that too has been proven to be true. So here we are in 2016 with the new preferred stockholders planting vines with us, Cabernet Sauvignon, at the Pameron Vineyard. You can see how it lays on the land here. And there you can see Seven Hill Vineyard at its base. We named this vineyard Pamburn after my fourth great-grandfather. And he was actually he was recognized as Walla Walla's first citizen. But we also named it after his spouse, Kitty Pamburn. And so it's really named after both of them. But they worked together to run the Hudson's Bay Company's Fort Nez Perce trading post back in the early 1830s to early 1840s. And so you can see in this image the family name Pamburn, and there's many Pamburns actually that live up there and are owners with us, share ownership as through preferred shareholders in this project. We own actually 87 acres, almost 90 acres up here on that hillside that are in those two parcels as I described. And before I go on, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. Maybe I should go back and just show you this. There's that symbol that's on the top of Pamburn. That's actually a Native American symbol. And the reason for that is it recognizes the origin of my family, which is Native American as well as French Canadian. And that's a symbol that the Native Americans would they would paint on the breastplates of what were called breechcloths, which they wore over their shoulders, on their chest, and on their back. And it really is symbolizes, that cross symbolizes the great four forces, the four natural forces and seasons. The Native Americans were very spiritual, and so their imagery was representative of not just the land but also of the seasons. Now, this wine, if you're tasting it, you'll find that it's got that Walla Walla AVA characteristics of very fine tannins, wonderfully structured wines that are multi-layered. They're, have this fragrant kind of black raspberry, dark chocolate, and crushed stone. But I think a classic example of the wines from this hillside. It slopes, like I said, north, and it's at high elevation, so it's above the frost danger by and large, because it's such a high elevation. But one of the advantages of being at high elevation and facing north is that it's a little cooler, and so as a consequence retains more acidity and has a longer maturation period in the development of the grapes. Now here's Sadie Drury. She's the general manager of the North Slope Management Company. She looks after 8 vineyards, including ours, on this hillside. She is remarkably accomplished and serves on industry technical committees and in leadership roles in the industry. But she's been described by Sean Sutherland as one of the women behind some of Washington's greatest wine grapevines. She also has earned recognition for her environmental stewardship in her leadership in the organization called Low Input Viticulture and Enology. And here you can see her with her family. There's Charlie, her husband, and Stella, her daughter. We have a really cute picture of Stella planting grapevine with her shovel. As you can see, she's hanging on to. But this is the reason why I show this to you is this is a remarkable family. They represent very much how we work with each other, how we support each other, how we regard each other as family members. And so they're very important to us, as all the people under their charge in looking after these vines. But I also just wanted to emphasize that the remarkable women that are really making our organization what it is, from my wife to others in the organization. Christine is our winery director. Mandy, who's on this call, Mandy Morgan, Dana. I mean, they're just remarkable women who are providing leadership in our organization. And that's really part of the brand story that I'm gonna share with you as I tell you the whole story behind Métis as we get to that. Now here is just the soil characteristics of the Savine vineyard. Now we're up on the left-hand side of that, but you can see as a cutaway, there's the basalt, there's that volcanic flow basalt I told you about, that came oozing up out of the ground at the base of the Blue Mountains. And then you can see on the far right, the alluvium. That's the alluvial fan that the Walla Walla River created. And then you can see the flood silts. Now those flood silts are from the great Missoula Lake flood that I think many of you know the story behind that. And then on top of that is this windblown loess that is this rock flower. And that's the cutaway. And so as you move further and further up in elevation, that loess gets shallower and shallower. And you get past the flood silts, you get into a different soil profile. And that's why we have those 2 separate parcels that we chose. Now here's an image of our Pameron Vineyard at harvest. And the Seven Hills is, as you can see down at the base across from the Dry Creek Ravine, that slope there, that cutaway is the Dry Creek Ravine. And there's 19 acres of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and Petit Verdot. We have about a total of about 50 acres that are plantable. So that's how far we've gotten. We've still got some more to plant. Métis. I wanted to spend just a little time describing the image here. That you can see. Here you can see that there are the two bucks on both sides of the crest. That's really a representation of from the Hudson's Bay Company's original, markings, original branding. You can see the dates at the bottom. The dates are of 1832 to 1841. That's the time in which my fourth great grandparents led the Nez Perce trading post for the Hudson's Bay Company. Sadly, Pierre, my fourth great grandfather, he actually died in office, in service of the Hudson's Bay Company when he was out tending the gardens away from the trading post. His horse reared and impaled him in the horn of the saddle, impaled him in his stomach. And actually the horse reared at a large white rock, which was actually a glacial erratic, a white granite rock that was brought down in the Missoula Lake floods. And that's how we lost Pierre. But in this symbol, you can see the hatchet and the peace pipe. That is from the Thomas Jefferson's peace and friendship medals that there were about 60 of them were made, and Lewis and Clark gave them out to the leaders of the native tribes as they came across in their trek. And then you can see some of the symbols of Pamburn, which is the Native American cross representing the four great forces of nature. And then, of course, the French-Canadian symbols, and then a Hudson's Bay symbol. But at the top of this, you can see a Native American woman, and she represents the Métis. She represents my fourth great grandmother, Kitty Pameron, whose mother was Cree. So Kitty was Métis. But it also represents all the Native American women who, in fact, created the Métis in their union with the French-Canadian trappers. It's really quite a story. Métis, the French term Métis means mixed blood. And the Métis were essentially developed into their own cultural identity and developed even their own language, which was a combination of Cree and French. And it was actually, the language was called Michif. And it's actually still spoken today. The Métis are recognized actually in the Canadian Constitution as one of the protected and recognized Aboriginal tribes of Canada. So it's we wanted to make sure we honored Kitty because she made it possible for Pierre to be effective and to work in peace with the tribes at the fort, but also with the remarkable contribution they've made to the development of this Walla Walla Valley. And here you can see the back label, which indicates this dedication to her. Now, here's the original Hudson's Bay symbol. And the Hudson's Bay Company was formed actually to establish trading in the Hudson's Bay, which is now in Canada, from England. And the charter from the Crown was established in 1870. So you think a little bit about this, and you kind of do the math, and you realize that it took them about 148 years to get from the Hudson's Bay out to the Columbia River, where the Nez Perce trading post was built. It was actually built at the mouth of the Walla Walla River as it entered the Columbia. That's actually where the Nez Perce trading post was built. And the original one was built in 1818. And as you know, Pierre and Kitty arrived to run the trading post in 1832. You know, when you're tasting and savoring, I'm hoping you're savoring that Métis. One of the things that's special about this brand, Métis, is it's a combination of the Rocks District fruit and the fruit of the Savine, of the Pameron vineyard and the vineyards that surround it. And so you get both of these remarkable characteristics together in a red blend. You get this really juicy nature of the Walla Walla AVA, but you also get this the savory elements of the Rocks District. So there's, you know, dark chocolate minerality, plum, mulberry, you know, with these wonderful firmness and fine tannins. So that's why we think that this is really a remarkable brand in its own right to put those two vineyards together. Now there's Kitty, my fourth great grandmother. You know, part French Canadian, half French Canadian, half Cree. And we do not have an image. There's no image of Pierre, her husband. None was taken, none was drawn that we know of. But that is an actual photographic image of Kitty. And she produced a number of offspring. There's 6 of the children actually survived past the young age, their very young infant ages. And one of them was a son, John Baptiste Pamburn. Now he's my third great grandfather. And John Baptiste Pamburn married Mary McKenzie, and they had a child, Louisa, and she was Kitty's granddaughter. And what happened was John Baptiste Pamburn was killed in a gunfight at the age of 31, and Mary McKenzie passed away in childbirth. And so her grandmother Kitty raised my third great grandmother. And they moved the entire family when Pierre passed away down to Fort Vancouver. And they went to help John McLaughlin run. Kitty went and helped John McLaughlin run the Hudson's Bay trading post at Vancouver. And then later, when John McLaughlin abandoned or left the Hudson's Bay trading post, he then staked a claim at Oregon City. And so Kitty and the family moved with John McLaughlin to Oregon City. Now, Donald McKenzie, he is the father of Mary McKenzie. And he's actually the one who got the furthest south into Oregon, and that's drew the river flow of the McKenzie River, which now carries his name. And Narcissa, the reason why she's an image on here is because I just wanted to let people know that when Pierre Pamburn, he was injured in that accident where the horse reared up and the horn of the saddle kind of gored him in the stomach. He had internal bleeding, and Narcissa Whitman looked after Pierre for 6 days at her cabin, the Whitman cabin, and where he then later, after 6 days, passed away. My family then, after the granddaughter then of Kitty's then married a fellow named Billy Carter. and they homesteaded Ribbon Ridge. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of the family's movement from Walla Walla to Vancouver to Oregon. And I just wanted to kind of give you kind of a little side story about what happened. And one of the reasons why I took such an interest in governmental affairs when I was young and focused in learning about governmental affairs and politics as I grew up. And it had to do in part with the story of my family. Because what happened was John McLaughlin filed for a donation land claim in Oregon City under the 1850 Donation Land Claim Act. And when that bill was being passed through the Congress, there was a fellow, the Oregon representative for the Oregon Territory was a fellow named Sam Thurston. And Sam Thurston talked the Congress into amending the Donation Land Claims Act to prohibit by name John McLaughlin's land claim in Oregon City. And so John McLaughlin was the only person's land claim that was made unlawful in the passage of the bill through the Congress. And there was a lot of jealousy that really lay at the base of that. John McLaughlin was Roman Catholic, which didn't help much with the Protestant Methodists that were there, that were in Oregon at the time. That certainly contributed to it. But the thing I think that was the big issue was that John McLaughlin had laid a donation land claim to Oregon City, which included the falls and the island there at the falls. And so it was a very important economic asset that he was deprived of by some pretty effective lobbying in the Congress. And so I learned that if you want to make things fair, you have to make them fair. I learned that you couldn't just expect people to treat you fairly. Now, John McLaughlin was loved and was regarded as the father of Oregon, but that still didn't mean he wasn't deprived by law of what happened to his land claim. And he died actually a very bitter man. But the Oregon legislature, after the state of Oregon was formed, realized the great injustice that was done and passed a bill giving the land claim back to the descendants of the McLaughlin family, John McLaughlin's family, for a fee of $1,000, which started the university fund in Oregon. Was that $1,000 that was paid by the descendants to recover his land claim? But eventually their family had the land claims rights restored, but only unfortunately after John's passing. So that kind of gives you a little idea of why I spent so much time understanding how politics work. This slide is just a slide to remind everybody about how we were able to do the things that we're able to do. We are very lucky people because many wine enthusiasts share our dreams of telling the Oregon story through wine and finding these remarkable vineyard sites and making these extraordinary wines that are expressive just of the places and where they're grown. And it would not be possible without the help of all of the wine enthusiasts that own Willamette Valley Vineyards. So I want to thank you all. You've been very gracious. You've been on this with me for now 55 minutes, it looks like. And I'm told that I better start answering some questions. So I'm going to click on the Q&A and see what I have here to answer. And then it says, so do our owners' benefits extend to Walla Walla wineries? And the answer is yes. You're an owner of Willamette Valley Vineyards. You own these wineries and these wine brands. And you receive significant benefits. You get access to these wines before anybody else does. And of course, you get significant discounts as a result. And it says here, your Pinot Noir is so much more flavorful and aromatic than the California Pinots. Why is that? Well, first of all, Oregon has very high standards in winemaking. Under Oregon law, in order to use a varietal name on a label, it's got to be at least 90% of true varietal content. That's one reason why. In California, you get a Pinot Noir and you think it tastes like Syrah. Well, could be a lot of Syrah in it because the federal law is 75% content. Oregon is 90. We even have higher AVA standards. When you have an AVA in Oregon and designate an AVA in a label, it's got to be 95% content. California, it's 85%. But the other part is that we have selected our Pinot Noir sites very carefully for growing Pinot Noir to demonstrate all the aromatic as well as flavorful aspects of it. We have some remarkably talented people in the growing of the wine grapes and in the making of the wine. So it's not just the place where the grapes are grown and the clones that were selected, but also the talent that's brought to bear. The other thing that I have explained to people, and I think it's really true, that when you make wine with consideration given toward the environment, to being a good steward of the land, to the people, the employees who are growing the grapes and making the wine, and to the community that your business serves, I think the wine comes out better because of that attention that's given to those things. So now let's see here. I got a question here. Jennifer asks, is the Donald McKenzie family? Well, he's produced the offspring, Mary McKenzie, which is my third great grandmother. That's the origin and the reason behind the McKenzie family name. It's Scottish as part of my family tree. Anyway, those are the questions that I have that were presented. I hope that this has been an informative presentation. I know I went through it really fast. There's probably a lot more stories I could tell, but I see here, okay, so that question's being answered. This has been quite a year for us. Think about it. If you look at the last 12 months of this period, you go back last 12 months, our winery tasting rooms have been shut down for, I think, a collective period of about 5 months. Whether it's the COVID restrictions, whether it's the smoke, or now the loss of power. And I think I just found out that portions of the winery got their power back today. I think that was 11 days straight. But you add it all up, and it's been quite a trial. But I want you to know that your winery is stronger than ever. But the reason why it's so strong is because, first of all, the ingenuity and the commitment of our employees, of the people of Willamette Valley Vineyards, they've been remarkably resourceful. Remember, we lost 43% of our market. We lost our tasting room sales. We lost our restaurant sales. 43% of our revenues we lost. And our employees, combined with our club members and our shareholders, figured out a way to get that revenue back. And there's a lot of shareholders and club members who've been buying wine, gifting wine to their friends, sharing it with their neighbors when they could, properly distanced. And that has given us the best year financially that the winery's had in our history. The other thing that's extraordinary is our shareholders really supported our preferred stock offering to help Jan finish the funding for the sparkling, the biodynamic farmed sparkling winery just southwest of Dundee, Oregon. We just completed this last year in just a 6-month time, a $9.3 million preferred stock raise. We did that ourselves so the shareholders wouldn't pay any brokerage fees in the purchasing of that preferred stock, but it is fully listed, NASDAQ listed preferred stock. And it turned out to be really remarkably successful and at a very low cost. Let's see if I got a few more questions here. Oh yeah, the question of the smoke effect. The smoke from the fires did impact the fruit in the Willamette Valley, but not all of the fruit. In fact, only some of the fruit. most of the smoke created fear. And so the California wineries that buy fruit out of the Willamette Valley canceled their contracts without really proper testing. And so many growers that had wonderful fruit were left stranded. And I credit our winemaking staff, our vineyard team, in trying to figure out how to help those growers. We took on, I believe it's 21 additional growers that had their contracts canceled. We bought, I think, $1.2 million worth of fruit. And because we had the capital from our shareholders, we were able to buy that fruit. And that fruit is excellent. You think about the growing year that we just went through, very low yields, 38% lower yields, the lowest yielding year by acre in Oregon history, really high quality fruit. We were able to rescue that fruit. And we needed it too, because our vineyards were also low. We had a very low fruit set because it rained during bloom. So the consumer generally wins, right? They get really high quality wine. But as a business, it's challenging because we have the same farming costs, even though our yields are so much lower. Well, fortunately, we had the capital to go and fill that fruit in, that fruit need in, and we also have remarkable talent. Our winemaking talent, as you know, made the solidarity wines with the wineries, the winery, King Estate and Our Vineyard, as well as Sylvan Ridge. And in doing that, the prior year, they learned a lot about how to deal with fruit that may have had some smoke effect. And so it was that training and that understanding that gave them a lot of confidence to make great wine. Anyway, that gives you a little bit of an idea of, and the idea of the shares. Remember, when you buy shares, when you buy preferred stock in Willamette Valley Vineyards, you you become an owner in the whole thing. And so, we have, look at our history as a company. We have over $50 million in assets. We have, of that, 21 million of that is retained earnings. So the company's been really quite successful over the years. So you have really a strong investment in the company. And what makes it even stronger is that we're owned by wine enthusiasts. And those wine enthusiasts then buy the wine and tell their friends. And so the cost of the dividend, believe it or not, is fully carried by the purchasing behavior of our shareholders. And so you own all of this. You own all of these vineyards. Okay, so let's see. The Jory Claim Vineyard, by the way, is going to be planted here. We're going to start planting this as soon as we get plant material, and you'll be able to actually see it with binoculars from the deck of the tasting room. There's a question about having a presentation for our facility, our Willamette Wineworks in Folsom, and I would love to do that. That's a great idea. We're doing something really exciting down in California. That's a whole nother subject. And so I'll save it for another time. And then also the connection with Griffin Creek. That's also another story, but very briefly, the first wine I made from Southern Oregon was in 1996. It was a 1996 Merlot, and I did it with the help of Don and Trouty Moore, who are also owners of Willamette Valley Vineyards that grow grapes down there, along with their son, now Michael, who is running the vineyard operations for Quail Run and Griffin Creek. And that was my first vineyard, was 1996. We've done extremely well with that Southern Oregon brand. And it's very unique just from that growing area. And we're continuing to do that, and they're continuing to perform very well. Okay, more questions. Let's see, interested to hear more about the expense reduction and revenue generation that contributed to the financial strength this year. Well, yeah, Chad, what happened was because of the pandemic, a lot of activities were restricted. And so we learned about how to do things with Zoom, and we learned how to go out and find revenues and sell wine without the traditional expenses that we incurred. And so we actually did have lower expenses and with a little bit better revenue. So that's what produced, I think, some of this really remarkable financial success. We're going to go in, though, this next couple of years, you're going to see our gross margins shrink. You're going to see us investing in expenses we're going to be investing in growing these new projects we have, like the sparkling wine facility. So Willamette Valley Vineyards is not for someone who's thinking about investing or selling on a quarterly basis or watching the earnings on a quarterly basis. These are really long-term investments. We're really behaving, looking at the business and investing in our business on a long-term basis. And so the investment is not really suitable for people that are looking to get in and out of the investment on a short-term basis. There's lots of stock you can follow like that. If you invest in Willamette Valley Vineyards, I encourage you to be a long-term hold in Willamette Valley Vineyards. Enjoy your ownership and see just what we can do. My belief is that we are just getting started. And you're going to see remarkable things come from the preferred stock cash that is now in our coffers, that is now funding the development of these projects. But keep in mind, over the next 2 years, you're going to see our gross margins shrink because we spent $1.2 million on fruit we otherwise wouldn't have because of the reduced yield in the 2020 vintage. So our earnings are going to decline for the next couple of years as a result of that. Yes, I've got to thank you to our entire team. And I would say yes. I mean, if you look at why we have so much success, and we have just a turned on group of people of all ages, all backgrounds, all ethnic groups. They're turned on, and they are focused on telling building these remarkable wine stories through this lens of stewardship and through respect for all our neighbors, all living creatures. So it's a privilege to work with them, and I'm going to work with them as long as I possibly can, because. But I feel, even though at 67 years of age, I think we've been doing this for 30 years. I feel like that I am just getting started as well. Thank you all very much for joining me. You've been on the call for a long time. I hope that you'll join me for another presentation. I know I'm going to do one on Dijon clones. Dijon clones coming up, and I've got a recommendation for doing one on what we're doing at Willamette Wine Works in Folsom with a brand down there called Natoma. So stand by for that. Thank you all for joining me.